In this video, I'm going to be covering some relatively controversial topics in the design world, and that is spec work as well as the website Fiverr. And I also wanted to cover the idea of design contests in general, but I decided design contests and design spec work are often so very similar that if I cover one, the concepts will basically cover them both. And I'm really just talking about this because I think it's something that's really fun for me to talk about. My views on it have sort of evolved and changed over time, and I'm really interested in what your views on this sort of stuff is as well, because people from all around the world will have super different perspectives on this depending on how much money they make, how much money is average for their country. There's just a lot of factors in play here that go beyond what is and what isn't good for you and your personal time. So first up here, I'm going to cover spec work, and spec work stands for speculative. And the very definition of speculative is it involves a high risk of loss, which I think is super appropriate for spec work because odds are if you submit something for a spec work style contest, or in this case submission, as they put it on this particular website, the odds are you won't ever get paid for your work, which is something you really have to consider when you're spending any time on spec or speculative work or submitting your work into different contests. The odds are with the amount of submissions that come in, your work will not be selected, it will not be used, and perhaps not be in any way usable to you. So I picked this particular website because it's very high profile for the most part in terms of the people who are soliciting for submissions. So we have Mercedes-Benz up in the upper left-hand corner here, super high profile company with a massive marketing budget. They could afford to pay the very, very best designers in the world and not sweat in the slightest, but they are instead opting to do this through a spec work campaign. And on the other side right here, we have Shell or Shell Oil, a multi-billion-dollar company who could easily afford to hire an army of designers to do whatever they want. And once again, they decided to go the spec work route for, in this case, an Instagram campaign. So I'm going to talk about both these two different things because I think it's kind of interesting, as well as some other ones that I found as I was digging through this site. So first up here, we have Mercedes-Benz calling for some artwork. And it's saying they invite artists from around the world to create multimedia artwork to celebrate the millionth fan of their German Facebook page. So it's a super specific thing. It's probably like a one-off, not a super high profile use in terms of how they will tend to use the design that's created here. Odds are they'll post it on their Facebook page, maybe throw it on their Instagram. Generally use is similar to that. And one person will be selected who will make 4,000 euros for this submission. So overall, in terms of when you're considering something like spec work, and I'm not going to say it's always the wrong thing for you to do. For some people, having your work shown by a major corporation like Mercedes-Benz in your portfolio, for example, could be a huge boost to your portfolio. It could make you look very good to have work that was successfully accepted by a company like that. If you're applying to a major agency, for example, and you can say you've successfully completed a project for Mercedes or Shell Oil or whatever the case might be for one of these contests, it is no doubt a positive for you. On the flip side, if you're one of the people whose work does not win, I don't think that looks particularly good in a portfolio unless it was super high quality work, because in the end you'll have to disclose, hopefully you'll disclose that this wasn't actually a paid for thing by that company. It was just something that you did and it wasn't selected or it didn't win, which basically portrays you as a loser in that scenario, someone who wasn't hired to create work for that brand, which if you're applying to an agency who's looking to get contracts with companies like that, that might not be the best way to present your work forward. So I'd kind of look at that more as college work that was an assignment than an actual professional gig. But as I was saying before, because this is such a very specific use, because it's celebrating 1 million fans on their German Facebook page, I wouldn't be overtly concerned about this ending up in a major print campaign, something like that. That could happen, and that is something that you have to consider, because if that did happen, 4,000 euros would not be a really fair price for it. But if it's just a Facebook post, that seems pretty fair if it's something you were simply hired to do. When you take into the fact that this is a total gamble, a total risk on your part for you and your time, you'll have to decide if 4,000 euros, the potential of that is worth your time. And if so, how much time you're willing to spend on something that probably won't be used. And also it's really important when you go to different sites like this to understand the terms of use for those sites, because sometimes if you submit anything at all, they will own all rights to the artwork that you submit. And that's fairly common. That's a fairly typical practice to have, because if you submit something and let's say a year later that company does something sort of similar to what you submitted, you could turn around and then sue them saying that they stole your idea and never paid for it. So a lot of times contests and spec work campaigns will basically say all work submitted belongs to the company that you submitted it to, and it is no longer your property. In the case of this particular website, it doesn't sound like that's the case. It says artists should retain their... Whoops, that's the wrong section right here. This is the correct section. It says artists that are not selected will retain ownership of the work. However, Mercedes-Benz has global marketing rights to promote their work on social media and other channels with reference to this creative invite for up to 6 months after the announcement of the selected artists. All artists will be credited appropriately. So in this case, you could lose the contest, but still have your work shown by Mercedes-Benz on a large platform. Even though they in no way paid you for this work, they're just using it on behalf of promoting this contest that they happen to run. So that seems like a pretty bad deal if you're one of the people who happen to lose this contest, which when dealing with the odds of things like this, you're more likely to lose than to win. So just always be certain to read through the terms, make sure you understand the terms, and understand how those terms can impact you and your work. Because sometimes the terms are really bad. Like this particular thing where they can use your work even if you don't win seems at best sort of questionable, but the ones where you lose all rights to your work, it becomes the property of the company that you submit it to. I would say just strictly avoid using those under any circumstances, because if you can't reuse your work after you create it, what was the point in the whole exercise other than the attempt to perhaps get a little bit extra money? So next up here we have capture the future of energy in cities for Shell's Instagram. And I'll just say in general, when you're considering your time and where to spend your time, really think carefully if you're going to give your work away for free, which I would look at spec work and contest work as free work first and foremost, not paid work, because the odds of you getting paid is so slim. It's essentially free work that's just a potential of something really cool happening. And in some cases, even if you win, the potential thing you win isn't worth the time that you've won it, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But right here, basically they're selecting 10 pieces of artwork and they'll be paid £1,000 a piece for the artwork, and the artwork will be used on the Shell Instagram. So I'll keep this one a little bit shorter. Basically, this one has a few more winners. The ultimate prize isn't that much money. I mean, £1,000 is a good amount of money, but let's say you spend 10 hours on this and you don't win. You just lost 10 hours and got nothing. And even if you did win, it's about £100 an hour on a fairly risky investment of your time to begin with. So you have to kind of put those odds in your head and decide if it's worth it to you. But just in general, consider you're working for a multi-billion-dollar oil organization when you're dealing with Shell. There's other ways you could potentially be spending your time for free. Perhaps design a cool poster or a flyer for an animal shelter or some other charitable organization in your area. That is work that is pretty much guaranteed going to be used and accepted. You won't get paid for it, but it's for a good cause, and that'll look a lot better in your portfolio as something that was used for a good cause than a losing submission to something like Shell's Instagram contest. When I see companies like Mercedes-Benz and like Shell doing these sorts of campaigns when they have so much money to spend on their marketing budgets, it kind of boggles my mind why they would choose this of all the different options. They might see it as a way of giving more people opportunity in order to get some high-profile work, but ultimately it's extremely exploitative in the way that it is. It's a carrot on a stick, hoping a bunch of people will submit different designs that will be of high quality, and then they can just cherry-pick the very best of those and pay not even that much money. It's pretty standard what they're offering in terms of these prizes here. And in some cases, it's even less than they would pay an agency to create that piece of art for them. So always keep that in mind, how you're valuing your time, how your time is being spent, and who you're working basically for free for. And this last one here is create official merchandise designs for Narcos. And Narcos is a Netflix TV series about Pablo Escobar, the notorious cocaine dealer. But what I found interesting about this particular contest, the submissions seem to be over on this one, so you can see the selected top 3 artists right here. So you can decide if you think these are super awesome designs or not, but this is what ended up being picked for these. But the details of this design and the prize money that were given really caught me off guard because of how high profile Netflix is as a company. And once again, they have huge marketing budgets, so they could pay whoever they want as much as they want to do these designs for them. And instead they went this particular route. So the prize, if you are selected, one of 3, and there's tons of submissions on this, so you can decide if that is great odds for you and your time with all these different submissions to have just 3 of those picked. But of the 3 right up here that were picked, the prize was $200 for each design, which is on the very low end of industry standard pricing for t-shirt merch design. And then the cool part is they give a royalty of 50 cents per shirt sold, which is kind of nice, assuming that these sell through at a fairly high rate. But honestly, $200 as the guaranteed amount of money. Like, let's say only 100 shirts sell, so you get an extra $50. That's $250 for a t-shirt design that you did exclusively for this Narcos TV show. So that's not artwork that's likely to be easily reusable. It's not something you can take around and flip around and resell again. It's so specific. Like, the other part of spec work is that it's very based on a specific spec where they will want you to do certain things in order to give you a good chance of winning. And if you don't do those certain things, if you don't make it highly specialized to that particular contest or that company, then the odds of you being selected are super duper slim. So I guess to sum it up as best I can, spec work in a nutshell is you're essentially working for free, so consider it working for free with the potential of earning prize money in the end in one way or the other, and potentially getting a high-profile company or project into your portfolio. But really, if you're doing this for any other reason than you simply find it fun to work on these various projects and you just want to create stuff you're driven to create, and it's totally cool with you that you're working for massive companies for basically free, then by all means have at it, go for it. But just be smart with your time and try not to get taken advantage of, because some of these can be very exploitative. So always be sure to read the contracts or the terms of service of each and every one of these that you look at very carefully before you decide to submit anything. So next up, we have Fiverr, which is a website that became famous for basically people offering services for $5. As time has went on, people have charged more and more, and they offer different service levels for these things. But the real thing about Fiverr is it's very divisive, because people will do things like logos for $5, which then in turn people say that devalues the entire creative industry where people can buy logos for $5. Why would they pay $500, $1,000, $10,000 for a logo? And this is something that used to make me much more upset a few years ago than it does now, because I just had a different way of looking at things. But ultimately, when people are paying $5, $10, $25 for something like a logo, it's best not to consider those people who are top tier clients. They're not the type of client that you really want. They're just people who want something done as cheaply as possible with very little concern to quality. Sure, of course, they want the best quality they can get for the tiny amount of money they're willing to spend, but always keep that in mind when you're thinking about a website like Fiverr. And also consider when you're dealing with a website like Fiverr, $5 in your country, like let's say you live in the United States, is not the same as $5 in a different country, like let's say Indonesia, where $5 will go a lot further than it does in a country like the US. So when someone charges $25, $50, $100 for a service that you might charge $500 to $1,000 for, after you really factor in the difference in currency value, they might be charging the exact same rate as you, but it's just for their country and not for your country. So although it sucks that they are undercutting you and offering a service for much cheaper, to them where they are in their location, it's a totally fair price for what they're offering and doing. And I don't think it's really on us to judge people for doing that. Ultimately, that is their location. That is the living wage for their country. And we should at best just be respectful of that, because design is a very much so a worldwide business, and you will be competing against people from all over the world. But what I've noticed is the very best from wherever they happen to be, whether it's a first world country, a third world country, it doesn't matter in the slightest if that person's super talented. The most talented people from those countries will charge top industry rates for the work that they do, because they know they can get it. And that's the cool thing, is you can live anywhere in the world and basically charge as much as you want, as long as you're good enough to back it up. So I'm just going to jump into a few of these different projects so we can kind of check out what Fiverr has on offer. So this one right here says, I will design 2 absolutely amazing logo in just 48 hours. And they have looks like 12,500 orders at 5 stars, with 95 orders waiting in the queue. At $5, you get 2 days delivery with 2 revisions, 2 logos in JPEG and transparent PNG. And looking through some of these logos, and I'm not really here to super judge the people offering this service, but as you can tell, these aren't top flight logos, and they really shouldn't be at these prices. There's a $5 service level, there's a $35 service level, which appears just to give some more file formats, as well as unlimited revisions, which, as a design tip in general, never, ever, ever, ever under any circumstances offer unlimited revisions, because people could just have you infinitely make revisions, and if you ever stopped, you'd be breaking contract. So never, ever do that. Never. $95 basically just gives you more logos, VIP support, whatever that means. And so a lot of these Fiverrs will have different various levels that people can pick and decide what they want to use. And then you can go ahead and pick the one that you think best fits what you're trying to do. So ultimately with something like logo design, when I look at this stuff, it's if you are a business owner, how do you want your brand to be perceived? Do you want your brand to be perceived as one that has a $5 logo? Or do you want to have a logo that someone spent weeks on or perhaps even months on going through revisions, carefully researching the considerations that go into making a great logo for your business that's very specialized for your business? Because when you're charging something like $5, you simply can't afford to spend more than a couple hours on it. It doesn't make any sense at all. Even in countries where wages are much lower than in the US, if they spend more than a couple days on it, they're really not making good money for their time. So they're very heavily incentivized to create these logos as fast as possible and just keep kicking them out as fast as they can to keep that $5, $35, whatever it is, rolling in. And here is another one. I will design 2 magnificent logo in 48 hours. And I thought this one is just interesting because they have some interesting character design, stuff that might not be the best for logos, but this person is obviously talented because they're creating some rather unique and just interesting illustrations of different sorts here, like this Fishy Foods logo that has this illustrated fish right here. That's a pretty cool thing to have for $40. And their $5 basic thing, it says no mascots and complex design. So if you're a buyer, like I have no idea what that even means. Like it's probably just text, like written text, but it doesn't elaborate. It doesn't really expand upon what you get for that $5. So even from the start here, you're just kind of left not knowing what's going on. But some of those logos were pretty cool indeed, at least in my opinion, for the fact that you're paying essentially nothing for them at $40. But the dark side of Fiverr and what makes Fiverr really scary is it's well known for being basically an asset flipping place where people will buy pre-made logo kits or download them illegally online and then just reuse them over and over and over and over again, breaking licensing terms of those particular things that they have downloaded, using those logo kits to keep pumping out more and more stuff at the $5 or $10, whatever it is that they happen to charge. And when you're using stuff that's already created and all that they're doing is changing out the type, at that point, if you can do that in under 5 minutes and you're making $5, $10 for it, you're making pretty good money. And they can just continue flipping assets like that. So if you're a buyer on Fiverr, you also have to be very careful to research whatever work you are given. Make sure it's not stock work that's just being reused illegally, because this is ultimately your brand. And if you have illegal work used on your brand logo that you bought from someone else, it doesn't really matter that you paid for it. It's still illegal and it will have to be pulled down. So if you made a really cool sign for this Fishy Foods logo and that fish, for example, ended up being stolen, which I'm not saying it is, but hypothetically, if it was, you'd have to have that all pulled down if the right person saw it and filed the DMCA and ended up taking you to court over it. Wouldn't be a good time. So a lot of times too, when people complain about something like Fiverr, that is a big consideration in there, is that the work being shown, it might not be unique. It might not be even their own work. They're just flipping it as quickly as they can to keep making money. And then there's things like this, which I don't even think should be allowed on here. And it just says, I will rank your website very high in Google with best SEO backlinks traffic. At $5, like number one, if you understand the complexity of SEO in today's market, it's extraordinarily complex, even the very best. There's no guarantees of any sort when it comes to something like SEO. There's no definitive rules that Google gives out. No, they will never say exactly what's in the algorithm to make your website rank as high as possible. So when I see stuff like this for $5 using SEO backlinks traffic, it makes me think of the spam where you get those random comments that just shoot a bunch of crazy text and then a link to a website. I'm sure this is the sort of stuff that is generating that. And if Google catches your website using a service like that, they will blacklist you from search. And that particular domain will never, ever be visible in Google search again. It's the worst possible thing that can happen to a website if Google decides to blacklist you, because almost all search traffic runs through Google. So when you have people offering services like this for $5, it's super sketchy. And it really makes me question, why isn't this somehow being regulated? Because this 100% safe and fast SEO thing, like there's nothing safe and fast about good SEO. It's a long, very involved process that it just takes a ton of work, a ton of research, and $5 doesn't even begin to cover that. So there's a lot of dirty, nasty stuff on Fiverr, and this is an example of some of the very worst that you'll find. But that being said, not all stuff on Fiverr I think is bad. Like I think there's some awesome stuff on Fiverr that I'm glad finds a home. It finds a market to be sold, which otherwise would be too niche or too strange or just too specific. It's not really a super commercial thing. So in this case, it says, I will draw your portrait like a GTA character. And actually, I think the illustrations are pretty darn good, especially for $5. Like if you want your portrait drawn like a GTA character for $5, these look pretty awesome. Some of them are definitely better than others, but at $5, who can really complain? It's just cool that this person's able to make money doing this thing that they obviously enjoy doing. If it wasn't for a service like Fiverr, this person might not be able to ever find clients to do this for. And they've had 754 sales with 28 orders in the queue currently. So congratulations to them. I do think Fiverr has some legitimate uses that are just generally unexpected or very unique that wouldn't find a mass market appeal. But when they're offered on a site like Fiverr, they find a place where they can actually make some money. And I think that's just an overall positive thing for the creative industry. So this last one here, I decided, what would I do if I had a Fiverr store? Like what's worth $5 of my time? So I decided to offer up this Fiverr for, I will think of one fantastic name for your pet for $5. It forced me to pick 3 different options. So basically all 3 options give you the exact same service of one name for your pet with no revisions. So if you decide you want to pay me $25 instead of $5 for me to think of a name for your pet, you can certainly feel free to do that. But if you want perhaps the very best pet naming service ever to be online anywhere, period, where you get just one name, no revisions for your pet, I'll leave a link in the description for you to check out my Fiverr page, and perhaps you can show me some support on this website. Once again, just check out the description. You'll find a link. Feel free to send me your $5, and I'll feel free to send you one really awesome or absolutely terrible name, depending on your taste level, for your pet. But that's it for this video. I do hope you found this video helpful, so please hit the like button or the thumbs up button if you like this video. Hit the dislike or thumbs down button if you did not like this video. Leave your comments about these different subjects, what your thoughts are on spec work, what your thoughts are on websites like Fiverr. And also, if you have different ideas for videos you'd like to see in the future, feel free to leave those in the comments as well. I'll be sure to check those out and perhaps to do them in this brand new year. But that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. And if you want to see more stuff like this in the future, be sure to subscribe. But that's it for now.